We're going to be sanding a raw wood door here, something we don't run into very often, but you have a different method of sanding a raw wood door that I've ever seen. Well, not necessarily a different method, but you use a different sander. The 5-inch sander is sold at Paint Life Supply Co. along with a 3x4. But I think prior to this video, you told me you would use this to sand this door.
Yes.
So Sherry, would you just walk us through sanding a raw wood door and talk about why you would use the 5-inch sander and not the 3x4?
Yeah, sure. So with a raw wood door, generally when it comes out of the it's wide belt sanded, right? So as it goes through, you've got this running, the grain running with the sander, but then this grain is running against the sander. So we get what we call cross grain, right? We also, you can see on here, you got some drag marks. So we need to take those out. When they sell doors, when a door shop either builds it or they buy it out, from a door supply company, they let these guys sit up. When wood sits up, it closes. So it's not going to accept stain the way it would, or paint the way it would if it was recently sanded. So we need to open the wood back up, and that's why we sand it. So why do I use a 5-inch? Well, the 5-inch gives me a little bit more torque, and it's also got that random pattern. This guy, like I told you in the previous video, has a tendency to leave swirl marks because it's a direct drive. I want to get that random pattern, and the idea is to do as little sanding on raw wood as possible. So the more you sand on raw wood, the more likely you are to get swirls.
Right.
So what I would do is generally, most wide belt sanders, they're finishing out at about 180 or 220, right? So we don't ever want to go too far back. You can go 150, but I choose to go to 180 most of the time. So I've got a 180 Film Tech, and I choose Film Tech again because I like the finish of the Film Tech.
Okay.
Right.
So you're not going to be using a 1/2-inch sponge, open cell sponge, or 10 millimeter or 5 millimeter sponge on this?
No, and the reason being is that when you put a sponge on raw wood, it tends to polish. And if you polish, you're going to get pooling, and you're going to have issues with your finish.
Okay. Pooling, just if you don't know what pooling is, that's your finish and stuff. You're going to be spraying on a seal coat. It's not going to be absorbing into the wood.
Right.
And it's going to pool on top of the wood.
Right.
Okay.
And you'll also get like some uneven staining because the wood will be polished. It won't absorb the stain.
Okay, cool.
All right. So what I want to concentrate on, and we talked about going around the racetrack, is on the cross grain. Generally, and I haven't said this before, but we always start on, stop off. You saw me go around twice, and the reason I do that is because I want to hit the rails, the rails at least twice, but most of my work is going to be right here on the stiles to get that cross grain out. The center panel, again, we want to go around. I use that pattern simply because I want to make sure I don't miss anything.
Right. What do you like these drag marks right here that are still showing up? What would you do to get those out?
You're going to have to do some more sanding.
Okay, so you would use the same sander?
Right, same sander, just do a little bit more sanding. I try to, when I'm doing a demo, I try not to, and unfortunately we had those in place, and we can work on those, but I try to show you what the norm is and doing that. The other profile sand in this area is it's delicate. So a conventional abrasive is going to cut down, it's going to flat spot. So we can't take either this guy or this guy into this area, right? Because we're going to change that profile. We're going to cause some issues. You've got a ton of profile in here. So this is another area where you got to go back and hand sand. And again, I go to the Eca Diamond. You've got some pretty intricate detail in here. I want to get in there, and I want to just rough it up and make sure that if I've got any mill marks, that I get them out, right? So same thing that we do all the way around. And again, we're just looking to make sure we get all our mill marks. You're going to want to blow this out before you lay down any primer. But most of these doors are pre-sanded on they're sanded pre-assembly. So this is a 5-piece door. So this center panel is usually all of this is already sanded, right? So all we're doing is just opening it back up with the sponge.
So that's something I didn't know. So they are coming pre-sanded. This is sanded, then it's all assembled. So you don't have to do a lot of sanding.
Right.
So the sanding is really just opening it up. So for those that may be the first time they've heard this term open, can you just explain a little bit of detail what open means, what that refers to?
Well, it's like I said, the wood, when it sits for any period of time, it's porous. Wood's porous, so it starts to close, right? It's going to close up. The grain's going to seal up on itself. And it's not going to absorb stain like we want it to. So it doesn't take a very big sand. You don't have to go into detail. You're not looking. And when we talk about, maybe some cross grain, that may have already been sanded out. Then it's just going around the racetrack twice. So, and again, like I said, this is going to be pre-sanded prior to assembly. So you're just going to really just go over it. Let's get it opened up. Let's allow that wood to be ready for stain and let it absorb it.
So that's good information to know. So now this thing is ready to blow off and ready to be stained and ready to go.
Yeah, I would need to hit just the edges again. I didn't. I didn't get these. Just simply
So you do your edges with your same thing, the Ecodynamic sponge. And so you would use the Ecodiamonds because you guys sell the 1-inch like black sponges.
The blocks.
The blocks are called uni sponges, I think.
Unisponges.
Unisponge. So you wouldn't use that, you would use the Ecodiamond.
I use the Ecodiamond. I personally, and this is a personal preference, I prefer the 1/2-inch. And the reason being is because it is so conformable in my hand. I can do, I do this all the time. And when I tell people that is because I can get in there and I can use as much pressure or as little pressure as I need.
In my understanding too, this is a rubber sponge right here. This outside is rubber, so if you're sanding like your corners and edges, it's not going to tear.
No, will not tear. So.
And then you mentioned in the beginning you don't like to use I think it was conventional abrasives, or you do use conventional abrasives on this.
You do.
You do use conventional. And for those that may not understand what the term conventional is, so conventional abrasives are typically your Film Tech and EcoStorm.
Right.
And so these are not conventional abrasives.
Anytime you apply like a sponge, any type of sponge is all your conventional abrasives are going to be belts, paper disc, cloth disc, film disc, sheets. Anything that actually has grain that stands prominent.
Right. So I'm starting to really understand this stuff, in detail now. So there you have it. The door's ready to blow off. It's ready to do our seal coat and ready to be finished and look like a factory finish.